He is the former Raja of Raskhali, who becomes a convict and so on, but he ends up in China. And during the First Opium War, it so happens that he finds himself actually advising the Chinese against the English. He finds himself in this situation because he's a very educated man. He knows very well how the English function, and actually this is based upon true stories. The Chinese at this period did try to co-opt a number of Indians and others to sort of advise them on what was happening in relation to the East India Company's attack on China. So Neil ends up in Canton, which is the modern Guangzhou, and those of you who've read River of Smoke will know that in Guangzhou there was a foreign enclave, which was also known as the 13 Factories. And the biggest building in the foreign enclave was the British factory, which actually had a wonderful library. So this piece is, the little bit section I'm going to read to you is dated May 30th, 1840. This morning, I arrived at the print shop to find Zhong Luji seated inside. This had never happened before, so I knew something unusual was going on. Zhong Luji, or Teacher Zhang, is an advisor to Commissioner Lin, who's the Chinese viceroy of Guangzhou. Their faces were somber, yet incredulous. They looked as though they had received news that they could not quite believe. "But you are," I said to Compton, and he shook his head despondently. "Mama, fufu, Anil, things are not so good. What's happened?" "Anil, we've received word from Singapore," he said. "A British fleet has arrived there from Calcutta. There are 6 warships, including one that is very big, armed with 74 guns. There are also 2 steamers and 20 transport ships carrying soldiers and stores. Many of the soldiers are Indians, some from Bangala and some from Mandalasa in the southern part of Hindu. The transport ships all belong to Indian merchants." The news has come as a great shock to both Compton and Zhong Luji. Despite all the warnings, in their hearts I think neither of them believed that the British would actually attack China. Commissioner Lin himself has been known to say that he does not think that it will come to war. I suspect he finds it impossible to conceive that any country would send an army across the seas to force another country to buy opium. I asked if they knew how many soldiers had reached Singapore. They said by their agents' reckoning there were about 3,000, of whom about half are Indian. Zhong Luji has taken some reassurance from the size of the force. He thinks the British would have brought more troops if they really intended to wage war. He cannot believe that they would attempt to attack a country as large and as populous as China with such a small army. He thinks the British only want to make a show of force, as they have done twice before, in 1816 and 1823, when they sent Indian sepoys to Macau. But it appears that British troops are preparing to stage a ground attack. According to Zhong Luji's agents in Singapore, the soldiers have been conducting many drills on land as well as water. One of their weapons has made a great impression on the townsmen because it bears a resemblance to the fireworks that light up the sky on Chinese New Year. The agent has learned from an informer that the weapon is called a Congreve rocket. These 2 words were written in English on the margins of the letter. Zhong Luji asked if I knew anything about this weapon, and I said no. The Congreve rocket was actually invented in Bangalore. He then asked if I could find out about it. At first I was dumbfounded. Where on earth was I going to find out about rockets? But then I had an idea. I remembered hearing that there was a large library in the British factory in Canton, with books on all manner of subjects. The factory's residents are all gone, of course, but the building is still looked after by its Chinese servants, many of whom are employees of the merchants of the Kohong Guild. It struck me that if prodded by Zhong Luji, we might be able to arrange for Compton and myself to visit the library. I put the idea to Zhong Luji, and he was much taken with it. Within a few hours, we received word that the requisite arrangements had been made. Shortly after sunset, Compton and I went to the British factory and were led through its deserted interior to the shuttered library, which is on the building's highest floor. The library is much larger than I had thought, with comfortable leather armchairs, large desks, and rows of glass-fronted bookcases. There were so many books that we were dismayed. We thought it would take us days to go through each of the shelves. Fortunately, there was a catalogue lying on the desk. With its help, I quickly located a treatise called The Field Officer's Guide to Artillery. Sure enough, it contained a section on the Congaree rocket. Compton and I lingered for hours in the library. We found several other useful books, one on fortifications, for example, and another on navigation. But to our disappointment, there was nothing on steamships or boiler engines. On our way out, I helped myself to a few books of my choice. It has been a long time since I last read a novel, romance, or a play. I scooped them off the shelves and stuffed them into my bag. Pamela, Love in Excess, Robinson Crusoe, The Vicar of Wakefield, Tristram Shandy, a translation of Voltaire's Zadig, and a half dozen more. As we were about to leave, my eyes fell on a book that stood out among the library's sober tomes because of its brightly embossed spine. The Butterfly's Ball and the Grasshopper's Feast by William Roscoe. It was the very edition that I bought for my son Raju in Calcutta when I started teaching him English years ago. It cost £1 as I recall, even though it was the cheaper American edition. I could not resist it. I pulled it off the shelf and dropped it in the bag. When I returned to my lodgings, the first book I took out of the bag was The Butterfly's Ball and the Grasshopper's Feast. I've read it to Raju so many times that I know it almost by heart. As I ran my eyes over the familiar illustrations, Raju's voice filled my ears, lisping over the words, "Come take up your hats and away let us haste to the butterfly's ball." I could feel my son's weight on my lap, and I could hear myself correcting his pronunciation. "No, Raju, this is how you say it." The memories were so vivid that the book dropped from my hand, and my eyes filled with tears. Thank you.